the unlikely hope. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the quiet suburban street of Glendale, California. The air was thick with the summer heat, causing the pavement to shimmer like a mirage, and a gentle breeze whispered through the trees, offering only a momentary relief from the oppressive warmth. It was the kind of day where the world seemed to move slower, as if the heat had pressed pause on everything around it. But for one little girl, this was no ordinary summer afternoon. 7-year-old Lily sat on a small wooden stool, her legs swinging just inches above the ground, her eyes set with a quiet determination that few adults could understand. The lemonade stand she had set up in front of her house wasn't the product of idle play or a desire for spending money on toys. No, this stand represented something far more profound. With an innocence that could pierce even the hardest hearts, Lily's lemonade stand was a symbol of her courage, her fight, and the love she had for her family. The table before her was simple: a red and white checkered cloth that had seen better days, a pitcher of lemonade sweating in the heat, and a mason jar with the words "Donations" written on it in bold, uneven letters. But what truly made this stand different was the story behind it. Lily wasn't selling lemonade to buy a toy or save for a trip. No, she was selling lemonade to fund her own survival. The small cups, the homemade sign, the carefully placed plastic cups, they were all part of a much bigger picture. Lily had leukemia, a diagnosis that had turned her world upside down just a year earlier. What should have been a year of playing outside, riding her bike, and laughing with friends had been replaced with long hospital stays, countless rounds of chemotherapy, and days spent too weak to even hold a paintbrush. Her golden hair, once long and full, had been shaved down to a soft buzz, the toll of her illness evident in every frail gesture. And yet there she was, sitting behind her lemonade stand, smiling as if the world was still as bright as it once was, her big brown eyes sparkling with a light that defied the pain. $1 a cup, she called out to every passerby, her voice filled with a hope that couldn't be shaken. Lemonade for hope. She beamed as the cars passed by, undeterred by the occasional slow roll of a window or a casual wave. To Lily, every passerby was a potential spark of hope. She wasn't just raising money. She was raising the spirit of her entire family. Her mother, Sarah, watched from the porch. Her heart ached, torn between pride and sorrow. She knew the days ahead would be difficult, that the financial strain of ongoing treatments would continue to mount. But as she looked at Lily, her bright, brave daughter, she saw more than a sick child. She saw a warrior. The warm breeze carried the sound of children's laughter from nearby yards, but the laughter coming from Lily's stand was different. It was not just the joy of a child selling lemonade on a summer day. No, this was the laughter of someone who had faced unimaginable hardship and yet refused to give in to despair. Every dollar that came her way wasn't just a contribution to her medical bills. It was a testament to her fight, to her resilience, and to her unwavering belief that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. It was a simple act, yes, but for Lily it was so much more. It was her way of saying that despite everything she had lost, her health, her strength, her innocence, she was still standing. She was still fighting. And with every cup of lemonade she poured, she was giving her family something even more precious than money. Hope. The beginning of a dream. Lily had always been a dreamer, even before leukemia had cast its shadow over her young life. She was the kind of child who ran barefoot through the yard, her laughter echoing like music in the air. The kind who spent hours creating art on scraps of paper, her colorful drawings filling the walls of the living room. Before the illness, she had been vibrant, her golden curls bouncing as she spun around, her energy endless. But everything had changed when the fatigue started. The long afternoons spent lying on the couch, the unexplained bruises that seemed to appear out of nowhere, and the slow, creeping sense of something terribly wrong. Sarah could still remember the growing knot of worry in her chest as Lily, once so full of life, grew weaker. Then came the fever, low at first, then spiking higher, refusing to break. And the moment Sarah had known for sure that something wasn't right, when Lily, unable to hold up her paintbrush, had struggled to finish a picture. That was when Sarah had made the hardest decision of her life. Taking Lily to the pediatrician, her hands trembling, she had hoped for reassurance. Maybe it was just a virus, maybe something treatable. But the look on the doctor's face, the soft words that followed, "It's leukemia," had shattered her world. She remembered the air growing thick, the words too heavy to process. She could hear the sound of her heartbeat, loud and insistent in her ears, as if the world had shifted on its axis. She gripped Ben's hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Their daughter, their bright, shining Lily, had leukemia. The words hung in the air like a nightmare, too real to escape. But even in that moment of devastation, Sarah had held on to one thing: hope. For while Lily may have been too young to fully understand the gravity of her diagnosis, Sarah knew that she couldn't let her little girl face the world of hospitals, needles, and endless treatments without a spark of hope to hold on to. Days blurred together as they navigated the pain and hardship of chemotherapy. The sterile walls of the hospital became their second home, the familiar faces of nurses and doctors now part of their routine. But Sarah had never wavered in her belief that she had to be strong for Lily, for her. She couldn't allow fear to consume them. And then, one evening, after another round of treatments left Lily exhausted on the couch, she had looked up at her mother with wide, hopeful eyes. "What if I did something to help?" she asked. Her voice was small, but filled with the determination Sarah had come to know well. "What if I sold lemonade?" Sarah had knelt down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead, her heart heavy with emotion. The question was both heartbreaking and beautiful. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice trembling with love and pain. Lily's eyes sparkled as she sat up, a new energy coursing through her. "I want to sell lemonade," she repeated, a soft but hopeful grin spreading across her face. "People like lemonade, right? Maybe they'll buy it to help me get better." In that moment, Sarah realized something profound. It wasn't just about the lemonade. It wasn't even about the money. It was about Lily's refusal to let her illness define her. It was about the spark of resilience that refused to be extinguished, no matter the odds. Lily, in her simple way, had chosen to fight with hope. She was giving herself a purpose, a reason to smile, a way to help her parents who were struggling not only with the burden of medical bills, but with the crushing weight of uncertainty. Sarah's heart ached as she hugged her daughter tightly. "That's a wonderful idea, honey," she whispered through her tears. "We'll make it happen." The next day they began to gather supplies. Sarah helped Lily sketch out the design for the sign. It wasn't much, just a simple board with the words "Lemonade for Hope" scrawled in crayon, but to Sarah it was everything. It was their dream. It was Lily's dream. In the quiet hours that followed, as they prepared for the stand, Sarah reflected on the transformation she had witnessed in her daughter. She had watched Lily, in the face of unthinkable adversity, find a way to fight not just for her own life, but for something bigger: hope, love, and a sense of agency. It was an act of courage, and one that reminded Sarah why she had to keep fighting too. For Lily, for their family. Together, they were going to make this lemonade stand work. And no matter how much money they raised, Sarah knew that it wasn't just about the financial goal. It was about healing in a deeper, more profound sense. It was about keeping the dream of hope alive in their hearts, about showing Lily that even in the darkest of times, there could be light. A slow start. The heat of the day pressed down like a heavy blanket, making the air feel thick and stifling. The neighborhood was quiet, the usual hum of activity now a distant murmur beneath the relentless sun. Despite the sweltering temperatures, Lily remained resolute, sitting behind her lemonade stand with the same bright, unwavering smile. Her eyes were fixed on the street, scanning for any signs of movement: a jogger, a passerby, anyone who might stop and buy a cup of lemonade. It was hard not to feel discouraged. The first few hours had been slow. A few cars had driven by, some slowing momentarily as they caught sight of the stand, but then they sped off without so much as a glance. Lily didn't mind. Her spirits were as sunny as her lemonade, and her determination never wavered. She adjusted her hat, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow, and poured herself a small cup of lemonade. The sweet start liquid felt cool against her lips, a simple pleasure in a day filled with uncertainty. As the hours dragged on, the initial excitement began to fade into a quiet frustration. She'd watched a steady stream of neighbors walk by, some pausing just long enough to take in the sight of the little sign that read "Lemonade for Hope," But still no one stopped. No one bought. The jar labeled donations sat untouched, the few coins inside barely making a sound. Lily didn't mind, though. She couldn't. She had a mission, a purpose that transcended the small setbacks of the day. She had no way of knowing that every minute she spent behind that stand was not only a testament to her bravery, but was also laying the foundation for something far bigger than she could have imagined. Sarah, sitting nearby in a lawn chair, watched her daughter with a heart full of pride and a pinch of sorrow. She knew what Lily was trying to do. She knew it wasn't just about selling lemonade. It was about reclaiming her power, her agency, in a world that had often felt too big, too cruel for someone so small. But Sarah also couldn't help but feel the weight of the struggle. With every passing minute, the financial burden of Lily's treatment weighed heavier on her heart. She had watched the medical bills pile up, watched Ben work endless hours trying to make ends meet, trying to provide some semblance of normalcy to their fractured lives. And yet, here was Lily, sitting in the heat, her small hands gripping the pitcher of lemonade, doing what she could with everything she had to help them. The thought of her daughter, so young, so pure, bearing the weight of such a heavy burden, made Sarah's chest ache. She wished she could carry it for her. She wished she could ease her daughter's suffering, take away the pain and make everything better. But there was no easy solution. There was no way to fix what had happened. There was only the slow, steady march of time and the hope that, somehow, they would get through it. At noon, a few neighbors began to stop by. Mrs. Johnson, an elderly woman from down the street, shuffled over with her cane, her steps slow but deliberate. She had lived in the neighborhood for as long as Sarah could remember, her friendly face a fixture of the block. Mrs. Johnson was one of the first to acknowledge the stand. "Hello there, Lily," she said, her voice warm and gentle. "How much for a cup of that lemonade?" $1, Lily replied, her voice soft but steady, her bright smile never faltering. Mrs. Johnson smiled and handed over a $10 bill, insisting that Lily keep the change. She patted Lily's hand with tenderness, her eyes lingering on the words "lemonade for hope," before she slowly made her way back home. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lily's face lit up, her spirits soaring as she placed the crumpled $10 bill into the donation jar. It was the first tangible sign that her efforts weren't in vain, that she was in fact making a difference. Sarah watched the exchange from her chair, her heart swelling with a bittersweet mixture of pride and sorrow. She wished things could be easier for Lily. She wished that a lemonade stand could be just a fun way to spend the summer, instead of a lifeline for survival. But, in this moment, seeing her daughter's face light up with hope, Sarah knew that this small victory meant more than words could express. As the afternoon wore on, a few more neighbors passed by, some stopping to chat, others buying lemonade or donating to the jar. Yet for all the well wishes and kindness, the money raised was still far from what was needed for Lily's treatment. Sarah could see the weight of it on her daughter's face. She could see the small glimmer of doubt that crept in with each car that passed by without stopping, each neighbor who smiled but didn't contribute. It was clear Lily was beginning to understand that this was going to take more than just one lemonade stand. It was going to take time. And in the back of Sarah's mind, a gnawing worry began to take shape. How would they ever afford it all? How long would they have to keep fighting, both for Lily's health and for the financial security of their family? And yet, as she watched Lily's unwavering determination, she knew there was no other choice but to keep moving forward. She had to keep believing. They all had to. The ripple effect. As the afternoon sun continued to blaze in the sky, Lily's lemonade stand became a quiet testament to the power of perseverance. Her hands, small and slightly trembling from exhaustion, continued to pour lemonade into plastic cups, a simple task that had taken on far greater significance than anyone could have known. The donation jar, though still far from full, was a visual reminder of the love and hope Lily was pouring into her community. Each dollar, each coin, each gesture of support from passing neighbors was more than just a contribution to her treatment. It was a ripple of kindness, a wave of collective humanity that was slowly beginning to grow. Sarah, who had spent much of the day watching Lily with a quiet heart full of pride and sadness, could now see that the lemonade stand was something more than just an act of desperation. It was becoming a symbol a beacon that was drawing people in, uniting them with a shared sense of hope. The early reluctance of neighbors, those who had passed by without stopping, had slowly given way to something more powerful. The ripple had begun. A few more cars had pulled over, and with each passing visitor, the donations grew. Mr. Alvarez, the cheerful mailman, arrived with his usual bright smile and friendly demeanor. He had stopped by several times over the years, his greetings always a little lighter, a little warmer than most. But today, something was different. As he approached the stand, his eyes locked onto Lily's, and he didn't just buy lemonade. He looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw the courage that radiated from this small child. "How much for a cup of that lemonade?" Mr. Alvarez asked, already pulling a crumpled bill from his wallet. $1, Lily replied, her voice calm and steady despite the tiredness in her eyes. Mr. Alvarez took a long sip, savored it for a moment, and then grinned. "This is the best lemonade I've ever had, Lily," he said, his voice genuine. "Here's $20 for your efforts. Keep up the good work, kiddo." Lily's face lit up, her tired smile widening. For the first time in hours, she felt like she was more than just a sick little girl with a stand. She felt like she was making a difference, like her struggle had meaning. The money in her jar wasn't just going toward her treatments. It was going toward something bigger. It was helping her feel like she was part of something that could truly change her future. Sarah, watching from her chair across the yard, wiped a tear from her eye. She had seen this moment coming in flashes of hope and doubt, but now she was watching it unfold right in front of her. The simple act of buying lemonade had become a quiet affirmation of the community's willingness to rally around her family. And with that, the ripple had turned into a wave. Word had spread through the neighborhood, whispers rippling through the community like a soft breeze that carried the weight of something greater. More cars stopped. More people came, their faces curious, compassionate, and ready to support. The small, humble lemonade stand was becoming something more. Something that no one had expected, but everyone was beginning to believe in. People weren't just coming for lemonade. They were coming for hope. By mid-afternoon, the jar was beginning to fill with a modest collection of bills and change. Neighbors stopped to chat with Sarah, offering words of encouragement, asking how Lily was doing, and often slipping a bill into the jar before they left. Some had known Sarah and Lily for years. Others were strangers simply passing through, but everyone seemed to feel the pull of something unspoken. Something about this little stand and this brave little girl that connected them all in a shared, unbreakable bond. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about witnessing something extraordinary, something that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. It was about seeing a young girl fight for her life, not with bitterness or fear, but with a simple act of kindness that was now reverberating across the neighborhood, growing stronger with every person who stopped to help. The moment of truth. As the day wore on, the heat of the sun began to soften, but Lily, despite her exhaustion, continued to serve lemonade with a quiet joy in her heart. Each customer who stopped by brought a small but significant contribution, whether it was $1, a few coins, or simply a few words of encouragement. Lily's determination had started a ripple, and now it was turning into something more than anyone had imagined. Then, just when it seemed like the stand might be winding down, a car slowed and came to a stop in front of the stand. The driver didn't just roll down the window or offer a casual wave like so many had before. No, this was different. A tall figure emerged from the car, his presence commanding but not overwhelming. With each step, a quiet energy radiated from him, a sense of purpose, of weight, of someone who had seen the world and understood it in ways that most people never would. The crowd watched, the hum of the neighborhood activity suddenly quieting as this stranger approached the stand. Lily looked up, squinting against the sun, unsure of who this person might be. He wasn't a regular passerby. He wasn't one of the neighbors. But there was something about him, something familiar yet distant, that caught her attention. He stopped a few feet from the stand and crouched down, looking into Lily's eyes. "How much for a cup of lemonade?" he asked, his voice deep, steady, and full of life. "Just $1, Lily replied, her voice clear and confident despite the weariness in her body. She offered him a cup, pouring it carefully, her hands trembling just slightly as she worked. She handed it to him with a smile. The man took the cup, sipping the lemonade thoughtfully. For a moment there was silence as he considered the drink in his hand. Then he turned his gaze back to Lily. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, unsure of what would happen next. "This is great lemonade, Lily," he said, his smile widening. "You've got something special here, and I think you've earned something special too." Without another word, the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He wrote something down quickly, then tore the check from the book and handed it to her. Lily unfolded it with trembling fingers. Her eyes widened and her mouth parted in shock. The check was for $50,000. The revelation. As the day drew to a close, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the street. The warmth of the afternoon had given way to a soft, golden light that seemed to bathe everything in a kind of reverence. And yet, despite the beauty of the moment, there was a lingering sense of disbelief. Lily sat at her lemonade stand, the hours weighing heavily on her small body, but still her spirit remained unbroken. Her fingers clutched the handle of the lemonade pitcher, and she moved with the careful precision of a child who had learned, perhaps too early, that every drop of joy and hope in life required effort. Despite the overwhelming exhaustion creeping into her bones, despite the heat, she kept serving customers, one after another, each interaction drawing a little more light into the deep well of her heart. The donation jar, which had once seemed so empty, now hummed with a quiet fullness, the crumpled bills and coins inside shimmering in the soft light of the evening. It was a beautiful sight, one that spoke volumes about the power of small acts of kindness. And yet, for all that had been achieved, for all the money that had been raised, the reality still hung heavy in the air. It wasn't enough. The bills were still mounting, the medical treatments were still ongoing, and no matter how many cups of lemonade she sold, no matter how many neighbors showed up to support her, the costs of her survival were too great. She had come so far, but she was still so far from where she needed to be. But Lily didn't let that break her spirit. She had learned that sometimes the battle was not about reaching the finish line right away. It was about pushing forward with everything you had, trusting that the universe, the people around you, would meet you halfway. And just when it seemed like she might fall short of her goal, that's when it happened. That's when the moment arrived that would change everything. From down the street there came a figure. At first, Lily barely noticed. She was too busy pouring lemonade, too focused on the routine of it all to pay attention to anyone walking by. But then something caught her eye. Something felt different in the air. She glanced up and saw a tall man walking towards her stand, moving slowly but purposefully. His presence was strong yet unassuming. There was a quiet power in his stride, something that commanded attention without trying. Lily's curiosity piqued. She could tell this man wasn't a regular passerby. There was something familiar about him, something that made her heart skip a beat. She wasn't sure why, but she instinctively felt that he was someone important. He didn't rush past like the others. Instead, he stopped in front of the stand, his gaze landing on her with an intensity that made her feel as if the world had suddenly paused around them. Lily looked up, a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty in her eyes. She adjusted her little straw hat, her hands shaking slightly as she asked in the way she had done all day, "Would you like some lemonade? It's only $1 a cup." The man bent down to meet her eyes, his deep voice carrying the weight of experience. $1, huh?" he said, smiling softly. "Seems like a bargain." He took a moment to scan the stand, the sign that read "Lemonade for Hope," and the donation jar, now half full with the fruits of all the kindness that had come before. "What's this all for, sweetheart?" he asked, his gaze fixed on her. Lily, her heart racing in her chest, looked at him with a quiet strength, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "It's for my chemo," she said simply, pointing to the sign. "I'm trying to help my mom and dad so they don't have to worry so much." The man's expression softened, and for a long moment there was silence. Lily couldn't tell what he was thinking. He wasn't speaking, but his eyes seemed to say everything. There was something in his gaze that made her feel understood, like he saw her in a way that no one else quite did. There was no pity, no sympathy, only a deep recognition of her bravery, her determination. And then, with a kind of grace that seemed almost out of place in the midst of a quiet suburban neighborhood, the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something down quickly, then tore the check from the book, holding it out to her with a quiet, steady hand. Lily's eyes widened as she took the check from his hands. Her heart skipped a beat as she unfolded it, her small fingers trembling as they pulled the paper apart. She had seen checks before, but this one was different. She looked down at the numbers written on the check, trying to make sense of them. And then, as she read, her breath caught in her throat. The check was for $50,000. She couldn't comprehend it at first. Her small voice barely rose above a whisper as she stared at the figure written on the paper, the enormity of it settling into her mind. This is $50,000, she whispered in awe, her hands shaking as she held the check in front of her. Sarah, who had been watching quietly from the porch, shot to her feet, her eyes wide with disbelief. "50,000?" she repeated, her voice trembling with a mix of astonishment and gratitude. She rushed to Lily's side, her hands reaching for the check, needing to confirm what she had just heard. "Yes, $50,000, the man said gently, his voice warm but steady. "And this is just the beginning." At that moment, Sarah's heart swelled with emotions too big to put into words. She glanced at the man, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't even know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough." The man smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that spoke volumes. "You've already said it, Sarah. Your daughter here, she's the one doing the real work. She's the one who inspires people to give, to believe in something greater than themselves." Lily, still in shock, looked up at the man. "Are you famous or something?" she asked innocently, her curiosity taking over. The man chuckled softly, his voice warm and humble. "A little bit," he said with a wink. "But not as famous as you're going to be, Lily." And then it hit them, like a wave crashing into the shore. The realization spread through the crowd like wildfire. The man standing before them wasn't just anyone. It was Michael Jordan, the legendary basketball player, the icon, the man whose name was synonymous with greatness. Whispers of awe rippled through the gathered crowd, phones were pulled out, and people began to murmur in disbelief. Yet, amidst the growing excitement, Michael Jordan remained focused solely on Lily. His attention was on her and on the incredible, courageous act she had undertaken. A chain of kindness. The world around the lemonade stand seemed to pause for a moment, as if holding its breath. The warm light of the setting sun bathed the street in golden hues, casting long shadows that stretched across the sidewalk, the air thick with a palpable sense of something profound unfolding. The check that Lily had just received, $50,000, wasn't just a lifeline for her chemotherapy treatment. It was a manifestation of something much deeper, the undeniable power of one person's bravery to inspire a chain of kindness that spread far beyond her little stand. As Lily held the check, her small hands trembling in awe, she could feel the weight of the gesture, not just in the amount of money, but in the meaning behind it. This wasn't just about financial support. It was about a community coming together, rallying around her, lifting her up in a way that transcended any material gift. It was a reminder that in a world often divided by uncertainty and fear, there was still hope, still goodness, still a willingness to stand with each other in moments of need. And yet, what happened next was something even more unexpected. It was as though Michael Jordan's donation had sparked something within the crowd, a ripple effect of generosity and solidarity that could not be contained. The first to act was Mr. Alvarez, the neighborhood mailman. He had been one of the first to stop by earlier in the day, a familiar face with a ready smile and a quick joke. But now, as he watched Lily's joy and Sarah's overwhelmed gratitude, he felt something stir in him. Something more than just sympathy, more than just casual kindness. He felt inspired. Stepping forward, Mr. Alvarez pulled a $50 bill from his wallet and walked over to Lily's stand. His face was solemn, but there was a quiet joy in his eyes as he placed the bill gently in her donation jar. "I think Michael's got the right idea," he said, his voice steady and kind. "Let's make sure you get everything you need." He patted Lily on the shoulder, his gesture a silent affirmation of the power of community, of shared responsibility. And just like that, the floodgates opened. One by one, other neighbors stepped forward. The young couple who had moved into the house on the corner, who had only recently become acquainted with Sarah, reached into their pockets, pulling out what they could spare. $20, $50, even a few crumpled 20s. It wasn't the amount that mattered. It was the solidarity, the quiet, unspoken understanding that they were all part of something much bigger than themselves. A mother with a stroller stopped by and slipped a $100 bill into the jar with a smile. "You're doing amazing, Lily," she said. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of a lifetime of struggles and triumphs, of parents everywhere who understood what it meant to fight for the future of their children. Each person who donated wasn't just giving money, they were giving something far more powerful. They were sharing their faith in one another, their belief that we are all interconnected, that our individual struggles are not ours alone but belong to the whole of humanity. They were offering hope, not just to Lily, but to themselves and to the world around them. As the jar grew heavier with every donation, Sarah felt the tears well up in her eyes once more. But this time they were different. They weren't tears of despair or frustration. They were tears of gratitude, grateful for the kindness of people she had known for years, grateful for the strangers who had come out of nowhere to stand with her daughter, and grateful for the unexpected heroism of a legend like Michael Jordan, whose gesture had sparked a chain of kindness that no one could have predicted. Lily stood behind her stand, eyes wide with wonder as the donations piled up. Each new contribution brought a smile to her face, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a sick child fighting an invisible enemy. She felt like someone who mattered. She felt like someone who had made a difference. The sheer force of this kindness, this love, was overwhelming. It wrapped around her like a blanket, comforting her in ways that the best doctors and medicines couldn't. It filled her with strength, strength she didn't know she had, but now she was beginning to understand. Then, as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, a quiet, serene moment passed over the crowd. The donations had slowed, but the energy remained. No one was in a hurry to leave. They were all standing in the glow of something sacred, something that wasn't about money, but about human connection, about the quiet moments when we choose to stand together in the face of life's most difficult challenges. Sarah, overwhelmed by the generosity of her neighbors and the kindness of a stranger, turned to Lily, her voice breaking with emotion. "Do you see, honey?" she whispered. "This is what hope looks like. This is what love looks like. You've inspired all of us." Lily smiled, the full weight of the day finally settling in her heart. She hadn't just sold lemonade, she had sold hope. She had given her neighbors a reason to believe that even in the darkest of times, goodness could shine through. And as she looked out over the faces of the people who had come together to support her, she knew this was only the beginning. The kindness that had started with her small, brave act would continue to ripple outwards, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. Thank you for taking the time to read Lily's incredible story. If this story of courage, community, and kindness touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel so you can stay updated on more inspiring stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Lily's journey resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you believe in the power of hope and kindness. Let's keep spreading positivity and inspire others by sharing this video with your friends and family. Together we can make the world a little brighter, one story at a time. Subscribe, comment, and be part of this incredible journey with us. Your support means the world.